Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Welcome to another edition of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Have a fantastic Iron Man of sorts here, Mike Gillette. Am I saying your name right, or do you say
that's how I say it?
Gillete? No, not the French pronunciation.
Only when I'm in a fancy restaurant.
Awesome. So Mike and I were just chatting. He was bringing me up to speed on some stuff that is not so well known about him. Welcome, sir. Appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Hey, glad to be here. Are you wearing a West Side Barbell t-shirt?
No, it's a West Side Armory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine owns a gun store outside of Las Vegas.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. What's West Side Barbell?
West Side Barbell, based in Ohio, is the world's strongest powerlifting gym.
Okay.
And a lot of scary dudes have come through there, and the methodology of that particular gym is sort of propagated worldwide now, because they've just had so much success, and just an interesting place. And the guy who runs it is a fascinating individual, Louis Simmons. Anyway, enough about that.
Okay, so like some of the big gyms from back in the 60s, 70s, like those kind of like Worlds or something like that.
Actually, different vibe, because those gyms, which were huge and influential, were really about the bodybuilding culture. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that like as a pejorative, but it was a different animal. And excellence in that pursuit was all about how you look. Mm-hmm. And that's really a separate discipline from powerlifting. And particularly when you're powerlifting, in the heavyweight realm, and it just it doesn't really matter what you look. It's just all about the numbers. What can you move? What are your totals and so forth? Which is not to say that some powerlifters don't look freaking amazing, because they do. But it's the entire way they train and it looks similar to many outsiders, because they're using the same implements. But it's the way that they're using the implements that it's profoundly different methodologically.
Techniques of how they're performing the lift,
and just the way that they accumulate the stress. I would describe it that way. The way that they subject the organism to load, the way that they structure that whole process. Because what's interesting about powerlifters, and man, we're already off on a tangent.
Go ahead. I want to hear the rest of this.
Mike Gillette. When you think about powerlifters, and powerlifters are weightlifters who compete in this combination of three lifts: the deadlift, the back squat, and the bench press. And whereas, like, say, Olympic weightlifters, they do two lifts, snatch, clean, and jerk. And those two pursuits are interesting because their training is their sport. Mm-hmm. Their sport is their training. So it's not like they're doing wind sprints and running tires to have a better bench press. What they do is what they do, and that's mostly what they do. So just figuring out how much training volume, how much stress you can subject the organism to without, kind of tipping over the edge. They're always on that edge, and they're obsessive about knowing that edge, and how they can kind of keep pushing that meter just a little bit further, so they can accumulate more and theoretically derive the benefit from that. So it's a fascinating, weird, obsessive, amazing sport.
I've got some friends that are, I don't know if I'd call them power lifters, but they chase that dragon of how much. And I've got some buddies at Sorinex. I'm sure you know who they are. Sorinex.
Yeah.
And like that is a complete subculture that's of the lifting sports for sure.
Very much.
I'm more concerned with keeping my joints healthy. Mm-hmm. I do things like pull-ups, push-ups. I lift weights. I walk on a slack line. I do stuff like that. I got a whole 800 square foot home gym. There's no bench in it. Mm-hmm. I don't do any stuff like that.
Yeah. So. Well, it's one of the things I like about you, just in my sort of casual observations, is you represent the other facets of performance within the gun culture. Because for years the fat gun guy was kind of a cliche. You know, it's like, well, as long as I've got this, I'm golden. Why would I run? Why would I do this? Why would I do that? And, you know, so when there's a video clip of you on the rings or doing your slackline stuff, I mean, I really like that. And also, too, I like it just simply because it's a bit off the beaten path. I mean, dudes who work out typically work out in a similar way.
Sure.
You know? So just to show people, you know, different ways of slaying the dragon, so to speak. I'm going to start with the dragon analogy if you are. I'm competitive like that, even with the analogy.
It's not that I spent years in the trades, so that stuff is just very taxing to joints, just like martial arts is, practicing martial. Like I'm watching you smash through bricks, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but I'm very careful. Like I have buddies that tear pecs and they bicep tendons. Yeah. It's like, man,
I've ripped both.
And it's brutal. Like all of my training, this is something when we're in class, like the first question I ask people is, why are you here? And like, I try to thresh out that it should be to live a long, full life. Like you are training to protect yourself so you can go home to have dinner with your family. Like I don't want to practice my craft to end up like all crippled because of it.
Right.
Because then my life has become poop.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that's, it's the wise man who comes to that realization. And it's difficult to come to that realization because sometimes the pursuit is so seductive.
Yeah.
I'm always trying to monitor myself for unbridled enthusiasm, which even at my age, you know, can still sort of show up. And because if you have an ability to do something and you have an ability to do it, you know, at a fairly high level, you want to do that thing. It feels good. It feels natural. Yeah. I mean, hey, you know, God made me this way. I'm doing this thing. And, you know, getting to the point, because like, you know, in my case, you mentioned, you know, ripping biceps. I ripped both of mine, and both of them were what I would call self-inflicted. You know, one was a reckless, well, I guess they were both reckless choices. So when I'm still back in my action guy days, we're training a military unit, and we're doing just, you know, some basic subject control stuff. And I've got a couple guys, you know, big, young, strong, athletic guys, you know, and we're doing kind of like this standing armbar control thing where you can walk somebody from point A to point B, and one guy's just not quite lining everything up. So I said, how about you do it on me, and I'll just kind of talk you through it, and, you know, we'll know when we're correct. So we did, and he gets it, and I said, okay, now really sink it in there. And, you know, so he does. And I said, no, maybe a little bit more. Now, here's one problem is my pain threshold is so poorly calibrated because of the things that I do. I'm not prone to know right away when I'm in trouble. So that was one issue. And the other issue was just, you know, I was just kind of curious. This guy's got 2 arms to my 1, and I'm just wondering how long I can gut that out. Well, I gutted it out until my bicep ripped. There was no like preliminary pain, and it didn't feel like I was even pulling that hard. But then it was obvious what took place. So it's moments like that that give you the awareness of, okay, you're not always, Mike, going to be your own best friend. So
I've got really two sayings in class. I say, know thy shit and know thyself.
Right.
Like
man's got to know his limitations.
Yeah. Like I do some martial arts. I remember one time I've got 2 similar situations like that. One put 88 titanium staples into my guts after the fact. The other was like 2 weeks of immobility because of wrenching something in my neck, trying to fight through a choke that I should have just said, like, okay, you got me. I do not have the skills to defeat your choke. But it was like, at this point, I was probably like late 20s, you know, probably at the height of my physical strength and flexibility, and just all of my muscles fighting. Yeah. I literally was laid up. I could not move my neck for like 2 weeks. The doctors thought that I might have like physically damaged something in my spine. It's like, oh, that's really scary shit. I'm going to start to pay attention. Yeah. Like, because then is my training putting me I'm training to protect myself, yet I'm damaging myself in the training. That seems very counterintuitive.
Yeah, and yet the more you travel, the more you hear these common experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just sort of, it's common to people who are interested in just seeing where's the line. I mean, I'm still fascinated with, solving that equation. Where's the line? I always want to know. And now I understand that the pursuit of the line is, God, I posted something in social media like 2 days, literally on that topic. There's a line in training, the line between training like a badass and training like a dumbass.
Uh-huh.
And the object is to train as close to that line while still respecting that line. Yeah, that's an ongoing thing for me and for a lot of the guys that I sort of swap notes with. So I hear you, but at the same time, if you don't have those experiences, I think you lack a little bit of perspective. I think you have to drive your NASCAR into the wall and roll it a couple times, just at least once. So that's what that's like.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not going to do that again.
And then there's some people like Travis Pastrana, the famous dirt bike rider, that he's one of the guys that kind of made that sport on the map, because he was like, he jumps cars and flips dirt bikes over houses and stuff. He's been in the hospital so many times. Guys like that, if they're not pushing themselves to that point, they're miserable creatures because they feel the need to drive. I've got a younger brother that's in Tennessee today. They're jumping off a bridge. He does base jumping, skydiving. He's a big wall climber. He'll be in Yosemite for 2 months this year, and he guides in Yosemite.
Wait. What kind of job do you have when you can just go to Yosemite for 2 months?
He lives there in an off-grid, luxury off-grid camp, and it's a lot of Hollywood folks that come up there, and they want to experience Yosemite. Except they've got wood-fired saunas up there.
Oh man, how cool is that guy?
Pretty sweet, yeah.
That's amazing. Good for him.
Every year is burying a couple friends because those guys they push. I did this crazy base jump thing where I'm flying through the trees. I think I'm just content jumping off the thing and falling to the earth. I don't need to try to be Superman. And they just keep pushing and pushing until, and then at the funerals, they're all lamenting the death. But my brother always says, that is exactly how that dude wanted to die.
Yeah, that was the life they chose.
Yeah, you've been miserable otherwise. Let's do this for a sec, Mike, because some people don't know you. So here's my overview, and then we'll have you fill the blanks in.
Okay.
You were Army.
Yeah.
College educated.
Yeah.
SWAT cop at one point in your life.
Yep.
You built some training programs for Fortune 50 companies.
Yeah.
You had some stuff to do with some federal agencies after 9/11 when training. Correct.
Yep.
Author.
Yep.
Speaker, teacher, educator, father, grandfather, and you also do crazy feats of strength back in the old days. Do you blow up a water bag ever? One of those? You ever done that one?
Yeah, all of those were correct. Yeah, the feats of strength thing. The only thing I don't do is what most of those guys do. And
I forgot to add one thing. You have world records too, right? You're a world record holder?
Guilty. Yeah. I a couple world records and one appearance in Ripley's, believe it or not.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What was the Ripleys?
I came up with the idea for the Ripleys Stunt probably 3 or 4 days after I ripped my first bicep. And I was laid out, and my employers didn't know what to do with me because it was my gun side. My EP work was obviously parked for a while because I had surgery. And that's where I came up with the stunt. And the stunt was a variation on something I had done in the past, which is you get a guy, we'll call him Mike, and he lays down on the ground. And then you get a ladder, and then you get somebody to climb the ladder, and then you get a 16-pound bowling ball, and then that person drops that bowling ball onto this guy's Mike's stomach, right?
How high?
Well, it depends on how awesome I feel like being at a given point. Now, here's what's interesting. The I have a friend, he's an engineer. He's a combination electrical engineer, civil engineer, MBA, stupid smart. I said, I need you to do some math for me.
Yeah, this is what I wanted you to tell me.
Because this is what gets us to Ripley's. I said, I want you to figure out how high the bowling ball has to drop from in order to generate, because he had done some math previously, and I knew I was already exceeding 3,000 pounds of impact force per square inch, because it's only about 4.5 inches that actually hits you. It's not the whole ball that hits you, it's this.
Yeah, that's crazy.
This. He had already computed that it was technically, a couple thousand pounds. So we came up with a height for 6,000 pounds, and I did that while laying on broken glass.
And I'm assuming that
survive it, that gets you into Ripley's.
Did you get cut?
You always get cut a little bit, but it's not that bad.
Like stitches?
No, not like stitches, but I mean, just like pulling pieces out of your back, that kind of thing.
So it's more or less like if you're a tough guy, you can lay there and take it. But that bowling ball thing, though, that can kill somebody.
The bowling ball is no joke, and that was a rough day. But the roughest, abdominally speaking, stunt that I've ever done is basically the same thing, but forget the bowling ball. The guy just climbs up to the top of the ladder and jumps off onto your stomach.
How are you not, like, I've done some of that stuff as a young man. We would punch and kick each other in the guts and use our chi to try to dispel that energy. And what I'm thinking about is the concrete behind me. When I'm standing, my body's moving, but the earth, even soft ground, you got nowhere to go. So how is this person not shattering your ribs and spine? And
I don't have a good answer for that.
And how do you find the psychopath to jump on you? That's the other question. Because he's taking a lot of force too.
Well, and the other thing is there's a lot of responsibility involved. I mean, you have to be okay with the implications of that stunt. And I was basically, for a period of, I don't know, like 8 years, the only time I did it is when I had access to one particular guy.
Okay.
I tried it. I did a test reel for the Italian version of the Guinness World Record show. And I said, I don't want to do a repeat of the thing I've already done in the States. How about, let's see how many times I can withstand somebody jumping off the ladder onto my stomach in a minute. So the only guy I had access to was an elite gymnast. The guy's name is Spencer. And I said, okay, here's what I need you to do. Can you do this? Oh, yeah, totally. The thing that I wasn't prepared for is my normal guy, martial artist, trained to land soft. A gymnast punches the floor when they land. I mean, they literally, and they don't even realize they're doing it because that's how they get altitude for the next skill. And we did 30 seconds of that, and I thought I was going to die. That was horrible. And he was like nowhere near the size of the martial arts guy who typically did it. So, but the last time I did it is, sadly, my martial arts friend passed away quite unexpectedly at the end of last year, but he actually did it.
I've seen you write about that.
Yeah.
I hear that, man.
Yeah, thanks. And he did it for me, season 10 America's Got Talent.
Oh,
and
cool.
The props department had got a brand new ladder from one of the stores, and it was super slick and plasticky on top. So he came off not quite correct. So yeah, that was a cracked rib, and his heel kind of skidded and basically kind of sliced me open. And that's one of the reasons why I was wearing these black shirts. Nobody can tell if I'm bleeding underneath.
Funny. Let's go back a sec. So I want to know how a guy that has a college education, worked for years in public sector with your law enforcement career, why you're now jumping off of things. So what'd you do in the Army?
I jumped out of airplanes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the Army was a means to an end. I was like a lot of guys at a crossroads, at a very young age. And I had tried the wrong way for a while, and now I wanted to try the right way. So I actually was interested in law enforcement, which seemed paradoxical at the time, but after unsuccessfully interviewing at a couple of agencies, I was just so freaking young.
Okay.
Like 19 years old. I said, look, technically we have to interview you because of your test scores, but we don't hire 19-year-olds. Come back, go maybe check out the military, check out college, but come back later.
Come back when you're older,
So,
kid.
yeah, I absolutely did. Okay, so boom, I'm at the recruiter's office like later that same day because I'm impressionable like that, because there was money for school there. So I'm thinking money for school, law enforcement, it's all going to sort of shake out. But once I got on active duty, I realized that this was the coolest game in town. And I wanted to do that. So
you were airborne?
Yeah. I had gone in for a brief enlistment of 2 years. So that was really the only cool guy thing that was open to me. You had to give at least 4 years if you wanted to go to like Ranger school or try to test yourself SF wise. But I was still at Bragg and I was a happy young guy. And, things just kind of clicked. I worked really hard. Supervisors took an interest in me. And I actually was afforded the opportunity to participate in an ROTC scholarship program at the end of my enlistment. So I'm going to go learn how to become an officer and gentleman, come right back to Fort Bragg and spend the rest of my life jumping out of airplanes, living in the woods and, high-fiving myself because I'm so cool. And it was at the end of my first semester that I was in a climbing accident, broke my back, my ankles, medically processed out of the military, had no plan B, wouldn't have wanted a plan B anyway, and just basically spent the next 4.5 years trying to figure out how to recobble myself into something that could do something other than sell insurance. No offense to anyone who sells insurance. It just wasn't for me. And eventually, somehow, magically, I was fit enough to be a legit contender as a law enforcement officer. So I went down that road eventually and was hired, and life is good. And I think I was sort of low priority guy. We've got this school, it's an instructor school, nobody wants to go, send that rookie who's always lifting weights. So it was a law enforcement fitness instructor course where basically you go, you learn all the stuff, and then you can come back and function as an in-house resource to your fellow officers. And I found that I really liked the idea of teaching others, and I liked the pressure that came with being responsible for material. I guess I'm an expert in this now. I'm really going to have to up my game. And that just sort of grew like a virus. I became absolutely passionate to the point of obsessive about training. And I started developing a parallel life. I had my day job, actually it was a night job, catching bad guys, which I dearly loved. But my growing resume as a trainer, and I was pursuing the martial arts fairly aggressively in those days as well, I was starting to sort of orbit further and further away from home base. So by the time that I had bumped up against both oceans, I thought, okay, maybe this is what I should be doing. And I left law enforcement in 2001, and then, other things just sort of happened. World events kind of conspired to amplify my resume in ways I never would have expected. Mm-hmm. And to the point where, but kind of parallel with that, if there's any logic to these, sort of physical, mental things that I subject myself to, that was always there in terms of a keen interest in physical culture, a keen interest in mental performance, because those things had become necessary, to kind of not only in my early days in the military, just to sort of survive and thrive in that environment, but when I was smashed and there was seemingly no hope for young Mike, that's what I had to cultivate as far as expertise in order to, because no one else was going to help. Everyone says like, dude, you broke your back. You're done. Stop trying to be that guy. Well, I didn't like that answer. So I kept trying to be that guy, which meant that in the pre-internet universe, I had to do a lot of legwork to sort of figure some things out. And not everything I learned was applicable. Not everything I learned was even correct. But, I still sort of stumbled through that process, and it was an important process. And And those were areas of fascination for me throughout the trajectory of, the action guy phase of my life, all the way through EP work and being that guy and starting to put some products out on the market, and kind of seeing what that was like. And
just so everybody knows what Mike's talking about, EP work, executive protection. He's the fancy way of saying bodyguard.
Yeah.
Protect. Well, I'm not taking anything away from that. I'm just saying, so folks understand what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, hey, I don't want to put myself in the same category as Kevin Costner,
Funny.
But,
So tell me a little bit about your connection to the Fortune 50 company that you went to work for after 9/11 happened.
Well, after 9/11, it's a long story, but I ended up doing a lot of work for the airline industry. And that once that work was more or less done, I had developed some relationships, and that led to a conversation with a guy who was heading up a new academic unit at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, in Las Vegas. And this is a guy named Lee Van Arsdale. He had formerly been a squadron commander at Delta, and had just one of these larger-than-life spec ops resumes. And he brought me to Las Vegas. I thought we were talking about one kind of training. He was actually kind of screening me, I think, because of the work that I'd done. He had access to every freaking expert imaginable, but I think he was looking for somebody to speak English while conveying sort of high-level skills to an unprofessional in terms of their warrior propensities. We had this training project for the Disney company. Some people still have not heard that Disney was originally one of the targets that the 9/11 terrorists wanted to hit. They just logistically couldn't solve for all of the variables. It was so far off. The flight path, the structure of Cinderella's castle is really small compared to the Pentagon. Sure. So they abandoned that idea, but Intel seized in the early days of our foray into Afghanistan, indicated that was a heavily researched objective. So when Disney finds out about this, obviously they're concerned, and they look for a means to solve that. And I became the principal author of this training program, which involved them hiring people who would just, and as far as I know, they're still doing it today, people who dress up like tourists and just mill around the parks looking for terrorists. Not not uniformed security, because they had that, not even loss prevention, because they have that. It breaks my heart to think that somebody would steal something from Disneyland. I mean, what kind of a person does that, right? Nonetheless, so this was a big move budgetarily, because there's no ROI in all of these people, right? It's just an expense. Now, first they hire these guys and in all the parks, but they need to be trained. So myself and a handful of other guys that came from surveillance, counterintelligence backgrounds, that they were all like way cooler than I was. I was just the face of the program. And so there was lecture, and then we would take groups of these employees out in real time while the parks were open, which was crazy to get approval for. And we had staged bad guys, and you didn't win unless you could pick your bad guys out of these enormous crowds.
So you're looking at body language, all kinds of indicators.
Everything you can think of, absolutely. Yeah. And it was a fascinating project. I'm very, very honored to be part of that. I mean, that's a company that culturally means so much to so many people around the world who wouldn't feel good about trying to contribute to continuity of operations and thwarting the attempts against it. Which the good news is, bad guys were routinely being intercepted after these people were trained. Now, we don't know how bad, you never do, but
Sure.
it was astonishing how good they got, and pretty quickly. So that led
learning to pay attention to the right stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's stuff that, I mean, you talk to your students about that. I know that you do. So that led to a permanent position at UNLV. And
are you out that way? Are you based in that region?
I was at the Disney gig took me to Vegas, and that's where I was conducting operations until early 2012. Now I'm back in the Midwest. But
where did you say?
I said now I'm back in the Midwest.
Midwest, okay.
Right. So I authored curriculum for the Department of Homeland Security, Protecting Soft Targets. That course is still out there being taught. A few grant-funded vulnerability assessments. I was the project manager for I think the largest vulnerability assessment ever conducted, which was the state of Nevada.
Wow. The
state of Nevada. Now start breaking that down in your mind. The Strip, Hoover Dam, secret places, areas of seismic volatility, just all kinds of crazy stuff. So, there was a lot of things that I just kind of got absorbed into. I always use the analogy. We've all seen Forrest Gump, right? He just suddenly found himself in these situations. There's more than a little bit of that in my professional development.
Although the one thing I would add to that you probably won't say because you're a humble guy, is Forrest Gump was a movie. You had the knowledge, the background to put you in that position, and then you recognized the opportunity and took it. You didn't say, I don't have the juice to do this. You stepped into the role when the door opened.
Yeah,
right?
Fair enough. I mean, I think a lot of us, will get an at-bat, but, you have to deliver.
Yeah.
Obviously. And
when you do that over and over, you get more at-bats.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And, but at the same time, I've had a lot of amazing relationships and so forth, and I've been given those opportunities in a way that I'm, whether it was deserved or not, I'm certainly grateful for all of it. And so the academic gig eventually gave way to the most surreal chapter, which was 5 years of this EP work, the Bodyguard work. The client list was fairly short, but there are some people who are so wealthy that who they are by name.
Sure.
It was them. And I mean, there was the random celebrity that would kind of float through our system, but we didn't really court that business.
Sure.
Because that's almost a different animal. It's almost there's a risk versus reward aspect to that, because if you have personnel who have been assigned to, let's say, Lindsay Lohan at her most notorious, it's like, that's just a ticking time bomb. Sure, you don't want to be anywhere around that type of stuff.
Right, professionally speaking.
Yeah. And
I have friends that do that kind of work, and for actors like that, one of them is a guy that's the dude that's always getting DUIs and drunk and stuff. And the pay's okay, but I'm like, dang, man, you're eventually going to be just totally tied to that guy. That'll be your back.
There's all kinds of ways that's and there are plenty of people who are more than happy to take those assignments. So
sure,
because somebody needs to. So other than the constant travel and just the weirdness of that life, because most of my work in that field was ongoing. So you just get more and more entrenched with people, which is really strange. I mean, nobody wants to have security around them all the time. And I don't care how nice a person you are, it's irritating. I wouldn't want it. And, the inability to be in control of your own life in terms of where are you going to be next week? I don't know. Well, we were all going to get together and do it. Well, maybe I'll be there.
Sounds sexy until you're actually doing it.
Yeah, it's a weird animal. And I had sort of gotten past the point of being really impressed with myself for being in that realm. And I had gotten to the point where I was starting to look for an exit. And I wanted to make that exit before, I was, kind of, disgruntled or anything like that. Because the people that I worked with were extraordinary, so talented, so smart. I always felt like I was just kind of racing to keep up, which is how I like it. I like to feel like I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the strongest. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because if you are, well, you're already starting to degrade.
Yeah, you got the wrong friends and associates at that point.
Yeah. So, and that ultimately, because what was going on kind of behind the scenes was, more interest in my own personal development, and I'd had a reasonable amount of success with a couple of products, launched out to the multitudes, and I was starting to think that, I think maybe I can make a go of this.
What kind of products did you create?
Well, my first one was actually a few years prior to that, and that was a self-defense video package for. Were you around when threat response solutions were in their heyday?
Yeah.
Okay. It was for them. So, the complete over-the-top ad copy, but, 3-camera video shoot. They had the most gorgeous videos on the market. And
those were like on VHS, weren't they?
Yeah. What's your point? I already said how old I am, didn't I? Anyway.
Yeah. So training videos, and then what else?
Training videos, and then but my recent one had just come out, which was a strength training program, and cool. It was a pretty successful launch. But I didn't really know enough about launches and things like that. I kind of thought that we're going to just be riding this wave. Well, we weren't, but I had all of the unreasonable confidence to say, "Well, boss, I think it's time for me to go my own way. Take care, God bless." And off I went, and here I still am.
How long have you been on your own?
2012.
Okay.
March 1st was my last day at Action Guy Incorporated. That's not a real name.
When did you write the book? Have you wrote more than one book?
3, but one of those 3 is kind of like a collaborative thing. I just wrote a section of it. I wrote the manuscript for Mind Boss 2013. That's the one I've seen. I haven't read it. And then my strength training book, Rings of Power, which is all about suspension training using gymnastics rings. That was published by Dragon Door. That was written in 2014 and was released in 2015. Actually, both of them all 3 of my books came out in 2015, even though they weren't all written right then. Okay. So it kind of created the impression, good God, that guy writes fast. No, he doesn't. But
I'm writing down the name of the one book because, as you know, I like to play with the rings. I wrote that one. I'm going to order that one up. Yeah. So, Rings of Power. Mm-hmm. I want to go through both of these. Mind Boss, I believe, tenets of I can't read my own damn handwriting.
Tough thinking.
Yes, tough thinking, to take charge of your thoughts and transform.
Yeah. That sounds like that's the one.
So, what's the thought process there? What is somebody going to read about when they read Mind Boss, and what was the impetus to write it?
Well, honestly, I knew that if I was going to be a guy in that space, in that sort of self-improvement space, I had to have a book. And I didn't have to have a book because everybody says they have to have a book. I also had to have a book because if I don't have a book, people are just going to find out about me on YouTube, and it's like, he's setting himself on fire. That guy's an idiot. So I had to kind of balance things out.
Wait, do you set yourself on fire too?
Not intentionally. But when you've got the solution on the bricks and whatever, or the boards, it goes everywhere. It's like, you'll smash something and then you look and, hey, my arm's on fire. Awesome. Stuff happens. But basically, I don't want to lose sales by saying this, but there's not a great amount of intellectual diversity in a lot of self-help books. In the same way,
you and I talked about this before we were recording.
And in the same way, Mick, that if I wrote a book about strength training, and my preferred medium for expressing that training was barbells, well, that book is out there. But it's like I could go to someone else for firearms training. I'm coming to you because there's something about you that either speaks to me or you just have a way of articulating points that makes sense for me. It's like when you say it, I get it.
Sure.
And, we have different denominations. We have different instructors. So
right.
it basically, I don't suggest for a moment that Mind Boss, I saw this in action when I was a cop, because it's the stories that make the stuff stick. That's why, we teach with metaphors. The greatest teacher who ever lived taught in something called parables. The English language is unique because it is the most metaphor-rich language, averaging 6 metaphors a minute.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, there's so many sort of metaphorical fragments in it. You don't have to be like a learned person to be doing that. That's just kind of the nature of English, and the fact that it's why it's so hard to learn. We've got all of these words that it's not streamlined. It's more artful. There's more flourish in English than there are in some other languages. So I look at that, just like any of my my video courses, my live trainings. Yeah, other people offer similar types of processes, similar solutions. I offer them, from my point of view, with my own sort of methodology, a lot of which is kind of based on how I have learned after training thousands and thousands and thousands of people, 20 plus years. I have a sense of how to get a point across, live. If it's, if I'm talking just to a camera, I've sort of figured some of those things out. And I also have developed my own priority list, if you will. If I had 5 minutes with somebody, this is what I think would be most important. So I'm fleshing those things out first. Oh, we've got 5 more minutes. Okay, here comes the next most important.
Gotcha.
And I think that's, these are universal truths to any instructor that you speak to. But, I'm certainly a product of all of my collective experiences. So teaching a lot of action guys definitely has shaped the way that I come at some of this material. So I think that, I can be teaching something that I'll say Wayne Dwyer, who's no longer with us, but he was a well-known sort of self-help guy.
Wayne passed?
Yeah.
How long ago?
Not like a year or so. Year and a half.
I did not know that.
Yeah, but if you put the two of us together, other than the handsome visage and haircut, which matches pretty closely, we couldn't be more dissimilar in terms of delivery.
Sure.
He's a brilliant guy. I'm not trying to put myself in his realm, but just within this sort of self-help space, he's very soft-spoken. He's, flowery language. I'm much more cut to the chase. Here's a more meaty analogy than perhaps the, florid, ephemeral terms that, he might use. Now, we both mean well. We both want to help people. And it's just that, some people will gravitate towards him. Some people gravitate towards me. Some people want a younger mouthpiece. Some people want a female mouthpiece,
Sure.
Whatever. And
I've had some of his old books on tape. I loved listening to him on road trips.
Brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. And
I just looked it up. He died in 2015. I didn't even know he was gone.
Yeah. One of the first guys out there that really, in sort of like, there are the pioneers, the Dale Carnegies, the Napoleon Hills, but then, the second wave, but before you get to like a Tony Robbins, there was Wayne. You know,
Yeah.
there was sort of that generation, and the types of material that was, you know, forming the basis of what he would share. You know, Tony was a product of a particular type of training approach, and you know has thus refined that. But here's my Tony Robbins story. Okay, it's very quick. Now, when most people want help, they want guidance, they go to Tony Robbins. When Tony Robbins has a question, he comes to right here. So in Las Vegas, was at a VIP wedding, and I was assigned to Sylvester Stallone and his family.
Oh, cool.
Big social event, tons of famous people, to include the aforementioned Mr. Robbins. And it's dinner time, got everybody tucked in sort of this enclosed banquet room. So I'm standing on the outside because nobody wants Mike Gillette perched like a vulture right behind him. That's creepy. So I'm right outside the door, and evening progresses, and at one point the door opens a little bit. This enormous head pokes through. And if you've ever seen Tony,
Tony's head is huge.
He's a big man. His whole proportions. I mean, he's like me, only way bigger and handsomer. So, this head comes through, and he kind of turns, sees me, little smile, and says, "Hi." This is my attempt at a breathy Tony Robbins. It's horrible. Bathroom? Right over there. He said, "Thanks." So let's be clear on who the master goes when he needs the important questions answered.
The important stuff.
That's for right. Sure. Exactly. Yeah. And I would like to follow up that anecdote by saying, and that was the beginning of a long and very enriching friendship, but no, we never spoke again.
No, I will. I want to add something to that. We did touch on this before we began recording. You mentioned Jesus. You didn't say him by name, but any truth, the mouthpiece, as you stated, doesn't change whether the truth is legitimate or not. And I think too many people, they get too fixated on like the ego. Like this happens with preachers. Like, well, if he said it, it must be true. And then they drink the proverbial Kool-Aid, forgetting that the truth doesn't come from me or from you or W. Clement Stone or Carnegie or anybody else like that. Like that is when I think most people begin to give up like their logical, reasonable and thought. And they're like, whatever he says, that's it for me. And it's, I think it's good. I take quite a few training classes a year as a student, and not like I'm so great, but there's not too much I'm going to learn in a class like how to hold a gun or something like that. Like that after years and years and years and thousands of hours of training, you're not going to really teach me that. But there's always like one little nugget, like even like if I read your book or somebody else's, there's always like one little thing, like that one thing that, like you said, your life experience, or I try to remind people of this, like we're a sum total of every little thing that happened to us in our life, and that makes you, the beauty of you, which is completely different than my life experiences. So like we sometimes have to take a step back and understand that even though we could say, okay, it's just another cop that's muscle bound doing self-help stuff, like that's not really it. And clearly you're a very cerebral guy. You put a lot of thought into what you do. So like I wouldn't shortchange that. Maybe there's tons of good things in your book, the way that you approached it. Clearly you don't feel that way, but I want to make sure the reader, if they go to Amazon pick up a copy of Mind Boss, they know.
I'm just sort of being very matter of fact about the book. I mean, it's a solid book. I've had a lot of people say nice things. I had a collegiate track coach send me a note saying that that book helped get his team to some tournament that they hadn't hit before. And I was like, when you consider that there's no track and field specific strategies within that book, that kind of feedback is pretty cool. And it's also an interesting example of I'm often referring to old sayings like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Sure.
Sometimes the teacher is a book. Sometimes it's a book that you've owned for years that you never cracked open.
Yeah.
And you just really weren't ready for what was there yet. You weren't at a point where, not that you weren't ready, like, oh, this is cosmic, but
you didn't have enough experience for that.
Yeah, your perspective was not such that you would really find that the material resonated. It wouldn't mean anything to you. It's like, yeah, I don't care. And there's a lot of that in what people like me do. You're trying to hit people where they are in a way that's meaningful for them. And one of the things that sort of allows me to refine that process is I do a lot of one-on-one work. A lot of that one-on-one work is with athletes. And one of the things that's interesting about working with athletes is it's vastly different than if someone said, hey, Mike, I want to work with you. Why? I just, my self-esteem, my sense of purpose, it's just like, a lot of things that, okay, how are we going to know when those are better? When we're actually on an upward track. Hard to quantify that stuff. Well, an athlete lives in a very mathematical universe. So you get a sense very quickly, is this working or is it not? So if I'm saying,
are the scores up, or the
if I'm saying nonsense, then we'll know. And if what I'm saying is valid, we'll see that as well. So it's that particular universe is very satisfying for me to work in, because it forces me to to be at my best, and it will rapidly demonstrate if I suck, if I'm full of crap or not. So far I haven't had to confront that.
I often, when we begin a training program, I ask students, I told you, why are you here? And my goal is to get them to quantify exactly, because my theory is, and I'm sure you'll agree, and I want you to comment on this, is we can't, this is like my basic tenets of success. Define a goal, apply actionable steps, or define actionable steps, and then apply action to those steps, and then reassess from time to time. That's super, super condensed. But to just say, I want to feel better or be better, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
So, does that mean, okay, well, I just want to be more comfortable? Well, what the hell does that mean? Well, I want to be more comfortable on the range in front of these people. Well, when will I know you're more comfortable? So, when you have a situation like that, because you do things outside of the realm of athletes, what's your thoughts on that? How do you, or with people listening to this, how would you tell folks to go about? One of the biggest things I get, because I post a lot of self-helpy kind of stuff, I'll get a private message, easy for you to say, dude, I have no freaking idea what I'm up to. I don't know which way's up or down. My mom just died. I got no money.
Yeah.
It's always easy to say, hold on to hope, and pick a good direction, the cliche bullshit.
Okay. Oh, those are two great points. I'll try to speak to the first one and not forget the second. So to the first point, 100% in agreement. Specificity is critical. So what's your goal, Mike? I want to look better. I want to get in shape. That means nothing, obviously. So
right, what does that mean?
We basically, ride that horse all the way to the specificity corral. I say, okay, just like you said, what does in shape mean? Because there's probably a picture in their mind when they say that. Okay, so describe to me what you in shape looks like. Okay, describe to me what you in shape feels like.
I like that.
Awesome. Okay, describe to me what you in shape acts like. And just what are all of these different states going to reflect, this, and then, so where are we, and then of course, we have to figure out, does in shape mean look better, which it almost always does. as opposed to, I want to get my powerlifting total, to this. I want to get my one rep, squat max to this. But it could be. And it's like, so we figure out what are some good measurable parameters for that. How will we know if you're getting in shape? If in 2 weeks you've lost, X percent of body fat, and then start helping them create that. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't really do that in the course of one of your classes. You've got a whole room full of people or a range full of people, but you can at least get them pointed in the right direction so that they can start, figuring that out for themselves. And some of them will. Some of them, it's like you just point them in the right direction, give them a couple of good steps, to use your phrase, they'll start going. That's the rare person, though. Most people really need step-by-step, or I need you to create the plan for me. Yeah. Oh, I need you to create the plan. Also, I need you to check in with me weekly because I need my ass kicked.
Yeah, I don't have
otherwise it's not going to happen. So, I have differing levels of engagement with different people, kind of based on that. One of the reasons that I like working with athletes is because the thing that I'm least gifted at is trying to make other people excited about what they say they want to be excited about.
Ooh.
You know what I mean?
Say that again.
Trying to get other people excited about things they say they want to be excited about. It doesn't actually work.
That's beautiful, yeah.
I don't know.
I just wish I was passionate about this thing. Yeah, I can't.
Oh, man. It's yes. I've heard that so many times. I think it was like 8 years ago, I wrote a little essay that started off, Mike, I want you to motivate me, because it was taken from a conversation I had just had with somebody, and was like, no, I know that everybody says that. Oh, hey, I got my kid. He's a bit of a baseball phenom. I've got him with this coach. He's really going to get little Johnny motivated. Nope. Doesn't work like that.
Right.
But now you can be an encouraging force and a positive force. You can be, if you're really good, you can be inspiring. But motivation, that's
within.
That's you. And it's either.
I was talking with Mike Panone. I'm not sure if you know who Mike is. He's a pretty famous firearms instructor and definitely an action guy. He's the guy that created the Air Marshals firearms program after 9/11. And we were talking about, he wasn't patting himself on the back, but he was just saying that, like, and I was agreeing, I said bobsledding, he said something else. Like, I know if I wanted to be a world famous bobsledder, I could. I had no desire to be a world famous bobsledder. I don't know anything about bobsledding. So chances are I'll never be anything, I'll never sit in a bobsled. But if I was passionate about it, and that was kind of the nature of our discussion, is like, what is it that drives a person to, like, seek how many push-ups can I do or whatever? And when folks come to me, for example, and they start saying, like, well, I wish I could shoot like you. Well, guess what? It's not fun getting out of work before, or getting out of bed before going to work on the range in, like, training, or dry fire practicing in the basement or whatever. Like, it'd be fun to drink beer and watch TV. I would enjoy that, except the desire, to get the outcome supersedes my desire to drink beer and sit in the basement, or my fear of looking like an idiot in front of students supersedes my desire to drink beer and whatever. There's some motivator, something's motivating me, but I never thought about it until I'm listening to you, which is what we were just talking about. Like, it is still me, something in me motivating me, fear, or desire or something.
Yeah.
I pay the bills not because I want to, but I fear the electric getting shut off and my wife not being happy because I didn't pay the bills. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's interesting. So when you tell people I can't motivate you, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a neighbor's dog.
Oh, it's a neighbor's dog.
He's literally 5 feet from me, hasn't made a peep.
And the neighbor's dog's a little yelper.
I don't know. It's Friday. He's probably excited. But it's a gorgeous day and all the windows are open, so I'm basking in all the ambient background noise of the neighborhood. So here we are. Those are really good. Those are really good points. Yeah, the specificity aspect of it, giving shape. If we can't define it, it's always going to elude us. And with respect to, I'm talking about, motivation is inherent. When you have people say, yeah, hey man, I wish I could shoot like you. Yeah. Everybody wants to do cool stuff, but cool stuff takes work.
Yeah.
And, I coined the term maybe a couple of years ago, our hack-centric culture. When every answer, boom, Google, boom, YouTube, it's right there. I think knowledge is instantaneous. It's just a question of, which button do I push? You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to work for the answer. And I think that's shaping our culture in all kinds of ways that we don't even understand yet. But it certainly shows up in terms of, what people like yourself do, where you've got this sort of, psychomotor skill that is further enhanced by, your intellect and your wellness and in all of these other variables, and you try to create this optimal shooting platform, which is, your brain with its educated decision-making process, and your body, which you try to prepare as best you can, given the limitations that we're all subject to, and so forth. And I think that people, they'll see the end product, they won't see the work, and the work is not sexy. And I think that excellence is going to become more and more rare because it's hard. It's always been hard, and we're not producing, or I don't think that we're feeding a culture that celebrates hard or even really acknowledges the importance of hard. Hard is kind of like, well, if you were really smart, you figure out a way around hard. It's why I'm sick to death of the term hack.
Do you have kids?
4 kids. And
I thought so. I know I've seen you with grandbaby pictures.
Yeah.
I'm guessing the answer is yes, but did you push your kids to do the hard things? Did you, like, one of my dad's favorite sayings is, and this usually was contextual, like raking leaves. He'd come out and see like you forgot all kinds of leaves, and he'd say, have excellence in your work, and slap you in the back of the head. Go do it again, you idiot. So there'd be this message, then this, get out there, dumbass, and do it. Or just something like that. Vacuuming the carpet. You didn't do a very good job. You rushed it so you could go outside and play. And he'd say, as a kid, you didn't know what that meant. As an adult, though, man, I sweep better than anybody I know because of hearing that stuff. Yeah,
I think I did in some respects. I think it was more. I think that my message probably ended up being less about the task and more about respect, more about relationships, because the kids were coming of age when I was very much involved in law enforcement.
Okay,
and between my own really epically dysfunctional youth and my sort of lack of a good blueprint for...
Is that something you can talk about or would talk about at all?
Long story stuff, but yeah. Okay. Parents had to get married back when people felt compelled to get married when they got knocked up. Divorced shortly thereafter. My mom was kind of crazy. Ran around a lot, in bars a lot, guys in and out of the house. These are not guys that are going to treat a woman well. She remarries a guy who was just almost psychopathically violent, inhuman beatings in every conceivable way. I mean, one night she was thrown down a flight of stairs, fights, and then we'd run away, and then we'd come back and fights and run away, come back, so
you were conditioned to violence and adrenaline dumps.
Yeah, okay. And epic substance abuse. And then just like, if things aren't bad enough, let's do it so that your mom is like heavily involved in witchcraft.
Wow.
Like for years. And, you know, whether that's silly or serious, find me somebody who's wrapped up in that, who's in a good place, emotionally speaking. Right. So, and then, you know, she passes away from brain tumor when I'm 15. And I do what any, you know, sort of PTSD teenager does, dumb stuff, like on an epic scale. So that was my frame of reference coming into young married life. No, I had a very transformative experience around age 19. And the new version of Mike looks nothing like the old version of Mike, obviously. But getting back to the kids example, because I was now all embroiled in the world of copdom and the types of circumstances that they routinely intervene in, it had a lot to do with how I came home and then tried to parent. What was really important to me was, you know, how we were treating each other, you know, and how we showed respect to each other, and how I would show respect to the children's mother, and how how we would, you know, relate to each other as an example to them. So I think the biggest imprint that you would see on my kids now, one of which is much younger than the other, she just graduated high school, but the other three are all married and have kids, is it's just sort of a character thing. You know, the way that they relate to their own families, the way that they relate to the world, and the way that they try to sort of change the world, you know, in their respective ways. Because, you know, externally we're all, you know, very different, and you know, nobody's gone into the family business of setting themselves on fire, for example. They're all, you know, far more sensible than I am. But they definitely carry what was communicated to them. You know, they're just very grounded, very it's a poor word, but good people. You know, when you use that sort of term, just the way that they're attempting to live their lives, and you know, being of service to others, and being a benevolent force.
I like that, being of service to others. It seems like prevalent in our society today, the hack that you're talking about. Now that you say that, I don't think I've put much thought into that, but everybody always does look for the easy path, the short path. The nature of this podcast is the higher line, walking a higher path, which I don't know how many times now that you say that, I hear that, like, what's the life hack for losing weight? You know, drink this before you go to bed, and you'll have pounds melt off of you, and eat the same garbage, or it is it's a sickness. Actually, it's a mental sickness that we as a society have tried to shun that. Like, I do physical labor, have for my whole life. I'm a 5th generation carpenter by trade. That's what my family does. And still, from time to time, I'll get out on a job site and I say hump lumber. You know, we'll have a truckload of lumber dumped, and I'll go hump wood into a structure. And to me, that's like I'm earning a living. It doesn't happen anymore, but for years, I'd earn a living exercising. I'll pick up 10, I'll pick up 20, I'll pick up 30. And most people, what do they say? Don't you have somebody to do that? Can't, you know, me, I'm getting paid to do it. You know, like it's, and it's not, I think in some ways it's like putting in your dues to do that. But like the attitude, like I mop and scrub toilets, and I have no issue doing it because I want a good clean toilet and I want the floors clean. And it's not like being above or below it. Now, if I had a better use of my time and was going to pay somebody to do it, I have no issue with that either. But I think too often we as Americans, my son's in college now. My daughter's not going to college. She's going to be a firefighter. Her high school has a firefighter paramedic program.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah, when she graduates next year, she'll leave with a fire science degree and an EMT basic certificate, which is pretty cool.
Oh, man.
So she'll be able to go apply at a firehouse. She'll be 18 years old. So we were with some friends last week, and gentleman said, well, what college are you going to? And she goes, I'm not. And I didn't answer for her. I let her speak. She's almost 18 years old. And the guy looks at me. He goes, what do you mean she's not? And I pointed at her like you asked her. And she said, I don't want to. That's not what I want to do. And my thought process here is we've told children and young people, like, you have to go do these steps to get to some life. And my wife works where there's tons of youngsters now. And I'm not bashing on young people, but this society that we've created, man, it's like, well, I've been here for 2 weeks. I need an extra 4 weeks paid vacation. I'm going to need lunch served to me in my desk. You know, like, it's an absurd interpretation of what reality should be. Like, how would these people be if we plucked them and put them in a time machine and dropped them back 80 years or 100 years?
How about 20 years? I mean, just...
Yeah.
I think that that's a great example of, you can have the best of intentions, but some things only sound good on paper. And everything that we've done to try to make life easier, less stressful for young people has not helped them ultimately. And, we have not created resourceful young people who can solve problems, who can, function independently. And it's the reason I think that, we end up, we parented them wrong, we being society in this.
I understood, yes.
We invest about 20 years of going after it the wrong way, and then we resent them for having turned out the way that, of course, they would turn out like that. Like, we programmed that, and now we're angry about it.
Mm-hmm. I get a kick out of that when I hear people say three things. One, they need to do, they oughta, or they need to. I always say, well, who the hell's they? Who's they? Like, they oughta do this or that, talking about government or big business.
The proverbial they.
Or nowadays, like the millennials. And I think, man, you're a parent. You're a school teacher, you're a father in the neighborhood, you're a preacher, you're a whatever, a coach. You are one of the people that are creating, and that's not fair of me to just pick any random person, because most of my friends and associates are not part of that problem. But man, it is crazy how many people, what you just said, take no responsibility for what goes on in society. Like, it's not my problem. In a lot of ways, they're afraid of the litigiousness that we have. I don't want to get involved in whatever. I don't want to say something. I remember one time a kid and I were spitting off of our school bus. We were like 4th or 5th grade. We had the back window down, jumping around like lunatics in those green foam seats. And we're spitting out the window, just being idiots. One of us spit on a car window. I don't think it was on purpose. We were just being boys. Bus came to a stoplight. All of a sudden, the door goes flying open, and some man jumps on the bus, goes, which one of you assholes spit on my windshield? And we're all like sitting there. And the bus driver, it was this guy named Ed, I remember. He smoked on the bus. That's how long ago this was. He said, hey, you got to get off the bus. And the guy disobeys the bus driver, walks down, grabs my friend because he saw us, goes, quit spitting, sit down, throws him into the seat, walks off the bus, closes the door. Case closed. That was the end of it. The bus driver just closed the door, and drove back to school. I don't condone that behavior, but that was totally normal. Of course, I didn't tell my dad that story. He'd have whooped my ass. The school, we didn't tell them because we knew we were doing something we shouldn't. Yeah. And this guy shouldn't have probably done that, but he didn't hurt him. He didn't. He didn't. I don't think he said anything like violent or vile, but it was just like, hey, quit being assholes. Sit down, shut up. But people are so adverse to anything like that. I don't want to get involved. I'm just going to mind my own business, put my nose down, and maybe everything will be okay.
Yeah, well, and it's not the right answer, I think, from sort of a philosophical point of view, to not get involved, but we've made getting involved very risky.
Mm-hmm.
And to the point where it's a news story when Target employee tracks down shoplifter, gets fired. those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Because we're so averse to to getting involved, to making decisions outside the sphere of what the corporation might want. Jumping back to post 9/11 airline stuff, before there was the flight deck officer program, when that was still being kicked around, and are we going to arm pilots or not? This is kind of like in that 2001-2002 time frame. The CEO of every airline, to include UPS and FedEx, all signed one document to President Bush: please do not arm pilots.
I did not know that.
Yeah, because of the concern for liability.
Interesting.
Because obviously, how many times have you made the speech, anytime you introduce a gun into an environment, that environment becomes inherently more dynamic?
Sure.
But what's funny about that is up until 1967, every United States commercial pilot was armed. Every single one.
And what was that just by custom?
Because they would occasionally transport mail, and because within that mail might be payroll checks. And they were expected to, now think about this, the only time you can use deadly force in defense of property is fissile material, and that's a pretty narrow job description.
What material?
Fissile material, like nuclear material. Okay, so, but this is back 1967. You're using potentially deadly force to protect checks. You can just print another check, right?
That's insane.
So, yeah, but nobody thought anything of it, because in the 1960s, every pilot was an ex-military guy, and who cares if they've got a gun?
Right.
1967, I've got a .22 in my school locker because it's hunter safety class after school. So, obviously, things continue to get recalibrated. But I think a lot of that, and it's a cliche to be a middle-aged guy like me, complaining about young people. And I'm not complaining about young people. I'm complaining about what we did to sort of create that. And I understand, there was niceness behind it. It was like this benevolent, well, if we just do this, this, and this, then kids won't be stressed about that. It's like kids who aren't stressed about stuff don't do well. We have to tax their psychology periodically so they don't become useless. This is what we're seeing now. We have useless people. They can't do stuff. They get freaked out about everything, which is why.
But they need a safe spot. I just read a study about a high school trying to create these safe environments where no child, this was the verbiage, no child should ever have to feel pressure. It's wrong in this modern America that we can't create a safe school where no child will ever feel any kind of pressure.
And that's a PhD writing that. That's something that's like a genius. And yet how blatantly obvious is the error in that logic. Well, there's not even logic. That's a poor use of the term on my part, but that whole premise is so false. It's just inherently false, and it's the softer and squishier we all get, the softer and squishier we will all remain. And I can't even imagine how soft and squishy the next generation will then be. Because, we're trying to minimize all of the unpleasantness. Well, the world has always been a terrifying place. Life has always been unfair. Get comfortable with that, and this is actually pretty awesome.
I'm sometimes reminded that everything water seeks its own level, in my opinion. And I'm not in an apocalyptic way, but there's always somebody like you out there.
That's good, because I'm in a good mood right now, and I don't want you to bring me down.
No, you know what I'm saying, though? There's always some guy like you that's willing to stand up and not say, look at me, but say, check me out, where I came from. If I can do this, so can you. Yeah. And I think there's just too few people doing that, except now we have this huge resurgence of patriotism with 15 years of war. We've got many young officers, well, now older guys that are in their 40s and such, going into professional jobs, running for Congress, running for local elected offices, and those guys are becoming leaders in their communities. And I think that will begin to instill some change. People, I think, are getting sick of these discussions, like and having these blanket statements like snowflakes and millennials, and I'm tired of hearing it.
Yeah, any sort of discussion that, you know, sort of structured around an us them framework is really tedious, and
it is.
And all it does is provide therapy for the people having the conversation. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, everybody, come over to the house because we're going to be complaining about young people later. Oh, cool, count me in. That will be a whole bunch of potentially therapeutic conversation that solves nothing, and it's not really, you know, solvable in terms of, you know, the big picture implications. It's solvable, you know, and you kind of touched on this on the local level, you know. Instead of complaining on Facebook or, you know, over the fence to your neighbor, assuming that, you know, you still talk to your neighbor, or even know who it is, you know, just do something, you know, go do some stuff, some useful stuff. And then you'll do something productive, and you'll make yourself feel much better in the process.
I kind of feel like people sometimes will say to me, so I'm involved in local politics. I was the vice chairman of one of the political parties here in Illinois. I don't need to say which one, but needless to say, it's the one that likes guns and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And I hear from people, they'll say like, well, I'm not like you. Like, I don't know the governor. Well, I didn't know the governor till he was the governor. I helped him become the governor. Well, what like gave you the right to do that? Just doing it, man. Like, like you have to like believe in yourself to do this thing. And the more I've thought about it, like the totality of my life, I feel like you're saying, I'm looking at a picture of a friend of mine on the wall here, and he kind of comes to his resume like you do, this like, I have no business, and this is your words, not mine. Like, I have no business having done some of the things I've done. But you look at the way the guy lived, probably like you, that is why it worked out that way. And where I'm going with this is I look back at people in my life that were influential, men mostly. They were guys that learned something the hard way and took the time to smile, be kind, tell me something, sometimes something tough. And like that is what I tell people when they're like, well, what can I do? I don't know the governor, or I don't want to be in politics, or I don't want to be on YouTube, or I don't want to teach people. Quit being an asshole, you know, pay attention to the kids in your neighborhood. Be the kind of dad that when that kid grows up, he'll remember Mr. Smith or whoever as somebody that impacted him in a meaningful way. Something you said about your own kids. And that's, I think, something like, well, that's boring. I think too many people are like, I want to talk about something cool and sexy, and tough. Like, I don't know, man. I have a couple memories, 3 men all dead, and growing up, one of them, like my dad was not a mechanically inclined guy. I'd take my dirt bike or truck over to this guy's house. He was a friend's father. He had a full-time job. He had a house. He had kids. But he'd take the time to like show me how to like take the carburetor apart and just do that. And he was a drinker, a smoker, you know, he was a foul-mouthed guy, but like he'd take the time to show me. He'd say, Mick, sometimes it just needs a good bath. You know, I remember his name was John, him doing that stuff. And like he didn't have to do that. He could have said, you know, go to a mechanic. I ain't got time for you. But he took the time to invest in just a kid from the neighborhood that needed help. I think we need to do that. And I'm not talking about like getting to be good friends with all the neighborhood boys, but show these young men what it means to be a good man.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the story, and I like the, I like where it goes. Yeah, I think that we have, we all have the means to be a hero Now, granted, there's a hierarchy of heroism. Not everybody's going to be freaking Audie Murphy, and thank God, because that about killed him. But certainly we can be that guy. We can expand our sphere of influence, and we can make our sphere of influence a very positive influence. And, I think that when, someone like you has a platform, such as you do, and, I get a chance to hear that, this is kind of who you are, kind of, behind the mic and, and sort of off the range, because, when we're engaging with our students, our trainees, we have a sort of persona, and we also have some things that we can do and some things that we don't have the luxury to, hey, now that you're policing up your brass, let me tell you about my philosophy of life. Okay, that conversation, right? It's like, do we gotta, Mick? Come on, we'll buy a T-shirt. Just shut up. But
right.
But to know that that's who you are, that's a big deal. I think it's important for your audience, for your.
I appreciate that. I wasn't telling you that to try to say, hey, listen to me. I just I wanted to kind of get thinking in a positive direction here after we bashed on how bad we've effed up the youth of our country. Well,
yeah, because there's always a solution. It's not always the apparent solution or the solution that we want. It's not always the sexy solution, but there's always a solution. There's a means to fix part of it. How do you change the world? Well, you start where you live. And you will never change the world, but you can change your little corner of it. And what's better than that? So
I don't know, man. There's some singular men that have changed the world.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the average person is probably not going to stumble into that.
Right on.
Much of that is going to be circumstantial, and I mean, there's just some people who, right out of the chute, you knew they were going to be larger than life.
Right on.
But I'm other than a couple of strange people on the internet that follow my exploits on YouTube. Nobody knows who I am. But undeterred, I'm still doing what I feel called to do, to change, to influence my little corner.
So what is that? What is that you feel that you are called to do, in a nutshell?
Well, there's sort of like the nuts and bolts, and then there's sort of the philosophical answer to that. The nuts and bolts is that I started to learn things. This is going back, when I was just a punk kid hitting the Army. I learned some things in the Army, and I felt that once I figured out how to articulate these things, this is important, this is valuable, not just for me. This is like, everybody should know this. And as I got involved in law enforcement, I kept having those sort of, epiphany experiences over and over. Oh my gosh, that was profound. More people should know this, but they won't, because they're not living this life. They're not processing these problems, under this level of duress. And I just kind of kept accumulating this vocabulary of experiences, and I'll call them insights for lack of a better word, so that when I got to the point that I was doing large-scale training projects, so like, for example, I had a contract with United Airlines, 22,000 end users. That's a big training project.
Wow.
That's one training project. So how many people are you going to be impacting? Well, 22,000. What do we know about them? Well, they got into this line of work not because they're commandos, but because they like people, they like to travel, they're customer service oriented. That there's a sort of a profile that goes with that.
Yeah.
What can I share with these people that will allow them to retain that essential aspect of their personality and their own humanity, if you will, and yet will still make them successful in potentially dealing with something, that will end up being the most horrific experience they'll ever have in their life. So a lot of the things that I was, sort of dragging behind me by the time I got to that realm, I saw how a guy who looked like me, talked like me, was, kind of scary, could still bridge that gap and talk to nice people who wouldn't otherwise talk to somebody like me or learn from me. I mean, circumstances forced us together, essentially. Mm-hmm. And when I saw how the things that I had learned, that I had sort of filed away, thinking to myself, this is useful. This is going to come back someday. I'm going to remember this. And as I sort of, started to populate my instruction with all of that, and I saw how it helped make things land. And even though, yes, they were still scared, and some of them would cry during a training exercise because they knew people that died on 9/11. Sure. And back then, we thought another attack was imminent always. This was at the height of all of that. Yeah. So it was completely different emotional climate.
I remember that.
But when I saw that, and more and more regular people started to become my end users as opposed to action guys, because I had a particular approach when I teach cops and corrections and military guys, and that was very satisfying to me. But I kept thinking that the things I'm learning, they're bigger than just this vocational space. Someday I'm going to find a way to get this to other people. And that's what I've been trying to do. That's what I feel sort of called to do. That's why, God help me, if I'm in a gym full of, tiny, cute little gymnasts, girls, they're getting a piece of that. They don't know that, but they're getting a piece of that. The resiliency that I'm attempting to convey, I learned about that in an entirely different universe. But the things I learned, I've managed to find a way to contextualize so that it is of value. It makes people feel stronger. And if you feel stronger, you are stronger. If you are stronger, you're better. You make every space you go better. And I'm not talking like, a big physically strong person. If there are more strong young girls walking around, how many of those girls are going to be less likely to be victimized? Because, they'll have that sense of purpose and resolve and, inner tenacity, hopefully, that will allow them to prevail should that be necessary. So that's the gospel I'm trying to spread, is to make people experience strength in whatever context that kind of makes sense for them in whatever way they might want to experience it. And sometimes that's just physically. And in which case, I've managed to add to the resume the title of inventor. I'm working with a manufacturer of gymnastics training equipment. We're bringing out some Mike Gillette proprietary gear to further what those extreme athletes have to do.
Oh, neat.
So, the physical side remains, despite the fact that for me, the physical stuff tends to manifest in, why is he wrapping a steel bar around his throat? That doesn't make sense. Those are metaphors. That's not how I train. I'm not in my garage every day, like hitting myself in the head with a hammer. But the pursuit of the physical strength is a keen passion. And I'm still an ardent student of that. And, the cultivating, the best and the latest mental improvement methodologies. I'll never stop doing that. I was studying stuff earlier this morning. That never changes. And the thing that's really compelling about that is we have a sense about how strong a human can get. It'll get a little stronger, but not a lot. It'll get a little faster, but not a lot. They'll jump a little higher, but not a lot. But on the mental side, we have no idea. We have no idea how far we can go.
Yeah, our brains are
in improving that bandwidth.
Right on.
And that's why to me, it's so inherently compelling.
That is super. That's a pretty interesting insight there, thinking about that. I don't know if I've ever put any thought into that. You're right. The untapped potential of the human mind and how much is there that we don't tap into, know how to tap into. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah. So 60 seconds or less, if you had 60 seconds with somebody that's a listener here, what would you say to them? And then after you're done with that, we're going to make sure people know how they can get a hold of you, how they can find you online, how they can see you light yourself on fire, hit yourself with hammers, smash pipes into you.
Okay. So I've got 60 seconds with somebody. I would ask them this question, and this is the question. How would you like things to be? How would you like things to be? And once they describe that, okay, what are the kinds of things you see yourself needing to do to get there? And then they tell me, okay, are you doing those things now? And if they say no, which is common, I'll say, how about we start doing those things?
But
let's start there. And, you know, it's if you want things to be that way, then you start doing the things.
So simple, yet so powerful.
And yet I managed to create a 6.5-hour video course on that very topic, you know.
How do people find that video?
So simple, you know. It's like, you know, how do we keep writing books about these things? Well, because we need to help people kind of, you know, get to the point where they're ready to hear the thing, and we have to use the language that works for them, and stories that work for them, and, you know, the premise that seems doable for them, and you know, because I occupy that space, that's kind of my charge as well. I have to find the right key, you know, to sort of, you know, unlock, you know, how are we going to solve this for you? Because as many different personalities as there are, that's how many locks there are.
I like that. A lot
of locks are similar, but there's still variation.
Different keys. Interesting.
Right.
Mike, how do people find you?
Well, if I say go to MikeGillette.com, that will take you to a site that will try to sell you something. Now, we'll give you something. But before you know it, I will have stolen your email address. You'll start hearing from me all the time, and you'll get emails like, why didn't you buy that super cool Mike Gillette product? You know, because all the cool people are. So you don't have to start there. You can just look for me on social media. You know, I've got a fan page like you do. The pictures on mine aren't quite as handsome. I'm on Instagram. I've got a YouTube channel. I'm technically on Twitter, but my Twitter game is weak, I'm afraid. So people can find me there, and that's also where you can start to connect. You know, I've got a Facebook group. The book is Mind Boss. If you ask permission to join the Mind Boss Inner Circle, answer me these questions 3, we'll probably give you admittance to that. And that basically just makes you get easy access to all of, you know, my essays, you know, upcoming classes, you know, if another product's coming out, that sort of thing. If I found an article that's awesome, if I know of a training event that you would benefit from, I'll tell people about that. So the most comprehensive way is the Facebook group, but I'm on all of the social media channels that anybody would be on. I've got some other websites, but all of those sell something. So,
and I know if people just Google your name, Mike Gillette, like the razors, you will.
Same spelling, yeah.
You'll see not all, but you'll see tons of videos of you doing feats of strength in your demonstrations and such.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that stuff does show up.
Perfect. Mike, I appreciate the chat with you. Somehow we covered 2 hours here just shooting the breeze. And you maybe saw me writing. What I kind of do is as I'm writing here or listening, I'm writing down different things that are like key points. And I think we'll title this one, Think Strong, Be Strong.
Love it.
How do you like that?
Perfect.
It seemed to make some sense to me. I want to connect with you offline and talk more about some of the workout stuff. I know you've got tons of insights on that. Do you travel at all? Do you travel and speak? Can people hire you to come and do speaking engagements or anything?
Typically, like organizations, if I don't do like open enrollment things like you do.
But a corporation could hire you?
Yeah, and I'll be speaking at Ripleys University in a week and a half, delivering their keynote, and that's like a whole assembly of a who's who of martial artists. Ripleys is a very well-known training equipment manufacturer. Most of the stuff that I do is private events. So, like, I've got a series of engagements I'm doing for USA Gymnastics in the next couple months. But yeah, I've done a lot of corporate work as well over the years. So
if anybody's looking for that, you've got some contact somewhere they can find
so
you.
That's I'm easy to get a hold of.
Perfect.
For that kind of thing.
I found
and if anyone heard, oh wow, one-on-one stuff, that sounds interesting. Just so nobody gets angry at me or gets sticker shock, it's really expensive. And it's just,
You're the worst salesman I have ever met in my life.
And yet here I am. So, yeah, I'm not opposed to that, but I mean, it's like if I had no frame of reference for what people charge for that type of service and that type of, sort of oversight accountability, I would be shocked.
My local butcher shop that's been there since 1950 has a sign up over the meat counter, and it says, "Good meat's not cheap, cheap meat's not good."
That said in much less time than it took me to say the very same thing. That's awesome.
Mike, it was awesome talking. I'll get a link to you when we get this sucker posted up. And I appreciate you joining us. You guys, if you have not signed up for the Higher Line podcast, you can visit CarryTrainer.com. We'll put you on a email alert. And this is also, if you're listening to this on audio, this is available on YouTube, on the CarryTrainer YouTube channel, where you can watch besides just listen. See Mike's beautiful face. Be well.
Take care, everybody.
Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.